G'day, my name is Scott Wimble, the creator of Wimbledon Channel, and I'm going to speak very briefly tonight on one aspect of teaching that often is not emphasized, I find, when you start out. And you might find it in literature, but when we get into the nitty-gritty of actually teaching, day in and day out, it's often forgotten, not just by young, inexperienced teachers or beginner teachers, but by older teachers as well. And it's something that, if done right, can improve our teaching practice out of sight. I'm not talking about some fancy 7-step program of this, and this. It's a very simple practice that if you get into the habit of doing, then it should really improve your pedagogy. What I'm talking about is the practice of reflection. I was reminded of this. I have a prac teacher at the moment, and he did an exercise and received back a couple of answers to questions that were surprising to him. He thought they'd be better. I, sitting at the back of the room, was also surprised, and so we talked about it later. And I was saying to him, and it reminded me as well, it's one of the great reasons why you should have prac teachers, especially if you're an experienced teacher, to remind yourself of the fundamentals. When something goes wrong in the classroom, or when something goes right, it's very helpful afterwards to think through and try and come up with some reasons for why that activity went the way it did. Now, sometimes it may be that you realize your instructions weren't clear enough. Maybe you realize that you tried to do too much in a lesson, or perhaps the timing wasn't right. Perhaps that deep thinking, concentrating type activity wasn't great, period 6 on a Friday, for example. Sometimes the answer isn't as obvious as that, and that's actually when it's really helpful to start thinking through and actually maybe trying to find some evidence for why maybe that activity didn't go as well as you thought. So, for example, I suggested to my prac teacher, as the students had written down these questions, they were formulating questions for historical investigations. I said, well, what could we have done to find out if those questions were just aberrations or if there was a wider problem? And obviously, the next time we have that class, he can go around and he can check all of the questions that were written down rather than the one or two that he asked for and were volunteered. So one of the things you can do is find evidence. So reflect on what you think perhaps may have occurred, then go and find some evidence and see if it backs that up. Sometimes it may be just quite literally, I think maybe I spent too much time doing this or not enough time doing that, and so, process of trial and error, you go out and you try next time. Now, the reason why reflecting on your teaching practice helps to improve you so much is it keeps you thinking about what you're doing. It keeps you realizing that teaching is a practice, it is a skill. It's something that can be improved. There's no such thing as somebody who walks into a classroom and has it down perfect. We all improve over the years, and there are times when you have an activity that you've done with other classes and you go and do it with another class and it falls completely flat. Or there are times when you do an activity and you think to yourself halfway through it, I didn't put enough effort into this, or I didn't plan this as well as I thought, but it's actually gone really well. So reflection, I guess if you're going to use a kind of academic speak, you'd say being a reflective practitioner, probably. But reflecting and thinking back when something goes well or something doesn't go as well, what are the reasons for that? Trial and error, and always seeking to improve the way you're doing things so that obviously you start to get more hits than misses. And that's just a very simple process of giving yourself some time. I've purposefully done this in my favorite hoodie so that saying it doesn't have to be straight after the lesson. Maybe jot it down somewhere, 1 or 2 lines, and then take some time later on to think and go, now why do I think that happened? Is there any very quick ways of finding evidence that maybe my perceptions there were correct or not? Is there a way I can check up with other members of the class if I didn't explain that clearly enough, or if maybe I just chose the wrong type of activity, and I'll note that down, and next time I'll do better. It's a basic acceptance of the idea that that teaching is a practice, and it therefore takes practice. And one of the best ways to improve as a teacher is to continually be reflecting and thinking through, how can I improve on that? Or if that worked really well, why? So just a couple of thoughts there on a key skill for teachers: reflecting back on experiences and trying to work out and surmise why that occurred and repeating that.